Hi guys, today I want to discuss a fascinating topic: why heart transplant recipients experience organ donors' memories following transplant surgery. How can a person's memory or consciousness be transferred to another individual? Despite decades of scientific research aided by advancing technology, we still barely scratch the surface of what human consciousness is. Early dualism theories suggest that humans, and probably other animals, possess a spiritual and immaterial soul that confers consciousness, thought, and free will, capabilities that inanimate objects lack. However, according to current knowledge and evidence, most scientists now believe that consciousness or the mind is generated by the brain alone and nothing but the brain. They propose a monism theory that there is no consciousness or separate soul without the brain. The mind is what the brain does, and when the brain dies, the mind goes with it. But if this is the case, then how come there have been numerous perplexing reports of organ transplant receivers claiming that they have inherited the memory, experiences, and emotions of their deceased donors? To quote one of the heart-lung transplant recipients, "She felt as if a second soul was sharing my body." These heart transplant reports raise a big question mark on the brain-mind unity hypothesis. If consciousness is solely within one's brain, then why does a donated heart also contain that person's memory? Doesn't that indicate that our consciousness is not limited to the brain? Human hearts and maybe other organs can gain and retain memories too. On the other hand, if there is a soul beyond the human body that leaves this world when the body dies, then how can a deceased donor's soul linger with the organ receiver? Why didn't the entire soul move on to another realm? It appears that the phenomenon of memory transfer of organs is challenging both dualism and monism theories about human consciousness. I did some research and I would like to show you what I've found. One of the interesting things is that the mysterious brainwave spikes at near death might be involved in a memory transfer event. Let's dive in. Memory transferring and personality changes after organ transplants have been documented for nearly 50 years. The late neuropsychologist Dr. Paul Pearsall observed that heart transplant recipients seem to be the most susceptible to personality changes. Patients who had undergone organ transplants for kidney and liver also experienced changes in their sense of smell, food preference, and emotional factors. But these changes were usually transitory and could be associated with medications and other factors of transplantation. The findings for heart transplants appear more robust and more strongly associated with the donor's history. Although only a small percentage of heart transplant patients experience donors' memories or have personality changes, these cases are still significant and require serious investigation. Some organ transplant recipients recall specific instances of perceptions of names and sensory experiences related to the donors. For example, a patient received a heart transplant from a man who was killed by gunshot to the face, and then he reported to have dreams of seeing hot flashes of light directly on his face. Another extreme case recorded in Dr. Pearsall's book is that of an 8-year-old girl who received a 10-year-old girl's heart. After her operation, she began to have nightmares of a man trying to kill her. Her dreams were so vivid that she went to a psychiatrist who actually believed they were real. It was found that the donor was murdered, and the recipient, who had the nightmares, described the man in such detail that the police were able to find the killer and convicted him of murder. Some organ recipients experience profound changes in their personalities, behavior, and lifestyles, such as in food, sexual, music, art, and career preferences that parallel their donors. Probably the most famous case is a woman named Claire Sylvia, who wrote about her organ transplant in a book, A Change of Heart. In the 80s, Sylvia received a heart and lung transplant from an 18-year-old male who died in a motorcycle accident. After her surgery, she had cravings she never had before, like beer and chicken nuggets. She also began to have recurring dreams about a man named Tim, whom she felt was the organ donor. She sought out the family of her donor and learned that these foods were his favorites, and his name was indeed Tim. The phenomenon of memory transferring with organ transplant is puzzling and highly controversial. In order to make sense of it, several hypotheses have been postulated attempting to explain why memory can come with an organ other than the brain to another person. The hospital grape 1 theory suggests that perhaps heart transplant patients are being subconsciously influenced by the information overheard during their hospital stay. This theory, however, cannot explain cases like the girl dreaming and visualizing the murderer of her heart donor. Therefore, it likely is not a viable explanation for most cases. Some scientists present the proposal that personal data like memories can be stored in tissues, cells, DNA, proteins, etc. of the donated heart, and are then remembered by the recipient following transplant surgery. This is known as the cellular memory theory. Another hypothesis is that the heart is not just a pump, but also has a mind of its own, a little brain whereby memories can be processed. This concept is based on the fact that the neurons which made a human capable of thinking and remembering are not only in the brain, but also in the heart. This theory states that since the heart has around 40,000 neurons and its intrinsic nervous system, the heart acts independently of the brain, sending and receiving meaningful messages of its own through the autonomic nervous system, and the heart might have the ability to access and keep memories via its neurons. According to some researchers, the behaviors and emotions acquired by the recipients from the organ donor are due to the combinatorial memories stored in the neurons of the heart donated. In a way, this little brain in the heart proposal shares a similar concept with the cellular memory theory. Both imply that cells or neurons in the human body consisting specific memories and psychological preferences after being transplanted to a new body. This idea sounds interesting and reasonable enough, but can heart cells or neurons store such memories? As we are talking about memory transfer after organ transplants, we need to consider how memory is generated and stored in the human body in the first place. This is an ongoing research field with no conclusive answer, though most neuroscientists agree that memories are stored in the brain in the form of synapses, the connections between neurons. It might be easier for us to depict that our brain works similarly with storage devices like a hard drive, but they are in fact very different. Brain structure is much more complex and far from a hard drive. Also, from brain scans, we learned that unlike storage devices, memory of a past event is not stored at a specific location, but all over the brain. The hippocampus serves a critical role in declarative memory, our capacity to recall short-term and long-term facts and events. Declarative memory includes episodic and semantic memories. Episodic memory is needed to remember past events, recent or distant, such as your first day of school or what you had for breakfast. Semantic memory involves facts, concepts, and skills acquired over time. A new analysis published in 2022 has found that only the human hippocampus encodes the what, when, and where information that makes up the foundation of episodic memories. Suppose you're trying to retrieve an episodic memory of your prior year's birthday party. This memory may include the cake you tasted, the colored balloon you saw, what you felt emotionally, and even distinct smells in the setting at that time. All of these fragments of data may combine to form a distinctive memory of that special event. Researchers found that while the overall experience is stored in the hippocampus, the individual details are parsed and stored elsewhere. Basically, the hippocampus takes the whole memory and makes a jigsaw puzzle. It assigns the puzzle pieces to particular places in the brain, like smell will go to the olfactory region, Visuals go to the iconic or visual sensory area, and sounds go to the auditory. This separation ensures that in the future, exposure to any individual cue may be sufficient to activate the prefrontal cortex, which then accesses the hippocampus to revive the whole memory. The involved neurons are written connections with each other. This develops a large memory circuit. When recalling a previous event, the brain will show neurons firing up in several different parts of the brain, and the hippocampus is the key in storing and retrieving an episodic memory. Now, with this background information in mind, let's see whether the cellular memory theory and the little brain in the heart hypothesis can sufficiently explain why organ transplants might result in memory transfer. It could be true that cells carry certain memories and data. Yet considering episodic memories are stored within the hippocampus, neurons, and synapses, I doubt the cellular memory of the heart tissues can contain specific memories of events, like remembering a person's face or name, or food preferences. Such information seems to be outside the ability of what cells can obtain. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think cellular memory refers to a cell remembering what happened to the cell, not what happened to the person. A person can recall last night's steak dinner, but is not aware of what the countless cells experienced in your body during that meal. There could be correlations in some degree between a person's memory and a cell memory, but they are definitely not interchangeable. About the little brain in the heart theory, although the human heart has 40,000 neurons, that doesn't necessarily make it a thinking organ, which creates or retains memories. Let's not forget, neurons are also found in the gut, the spinal cord, and the nervous system, which all contribute to human emotions and mind states. To put things in perspective, the so-called second brain, the nervous system of the gut, contains 500 million neurons, over 12,000 times higher than the heart. The real thinking organ, our brain, possesses an astronomical 86 billion neurons, over 2 million times higher than the neuron counts in your heart. The heart does feed the information to the brain, but so do other organs. The brain, heart, and everything else in the body all work jointly, and they have precise functions. The heart is an engine that reliably and effectively pumps blood throughout the body, and storing episodic memory is not part of the scope of the heart. Furthermore, the brain consists of a systematic pattern of diverse neurons organized in a specialized way that allows us to produce cognitive thought and memory storage, while the heart doesn't have such a system or the many types of neurons. Again, remembering a past personal event requires hippocampus and related neurons in the brain, which the heart is lacking. Without its own hippocampus, can the heart generate or store episodic memories? There is a possibility that the heart may have access to the information stored in the brain, wherein the heart takes the memory and saves it in its neurons. Let's take a leap of faith and assume that the heart neurons somehow connect to the hippocampus and are capable of retaining memory. Then there comes other questions. Why does the intricate human body need to create duplicates of the same memory and store them in both the brain and the heart? What kind of memory can receive the priority to be stored in two organs? Thinking of the Sylvia's case, I doubt liking beer is deemed to be an indispensable piece of information to be stored in two places. The brain is the thinking and memory storing organ that runs very efficiently. It has billions of neurons at its disposal, and yet it still doesn't store redundant memories. So why would the body store duplicated data at the heart, which has 2 million times less neurons than the brain? Even if there is the need to store duplicated memories, then why not use the gut, which has way more neurons than the heart? Thus, my impression is that neither theory can decode the phenomenon of memory transfer of organ transplants in a satisfactory manner, but they may not be too far off either. There might be some other pivotal factors that can add to the theory and help to connect the dots, and that factor is the transitional stage of the brain and heart at near death, before organs are removed and transplanted. Let me explain. The autonomic nervous system runs the functions of our body that we don't think about, which includes the heart, breathing, digestion, and more. Our brain sends nerve impulses to regulate heartbeat and blood pressure. It's how the brain adjusts cardiac output and quietly controls other internal organs in the body. In normal conditions, cells and neurons in the heart should not contain personal episodic memory, as they are not programmed to do so. However, under an extreme situation, such as imminent death, the heart and brain behave very differently. Scientists observed increased connectivity between the heart and brain around the time of brain death and cardiac arrest. It appears when a person is on the brink of death, these two organs will go through a number of unique changes to try to work together to keep the body alive. In a previous video, I presented multiple studies confirming that at near death, human and mammalian brains exhibit short and intense brain activities in the forms of dramatic brainwave spikes. Such spikes might be a natural process associated with the end of a life. When a living body is deprived of oxygen during asphyxiation, either caused by drowning, choking, or cardiac arrest, the brain experiences a storm where it seeks to restore oxygen to the body. The brain sends emergency rhythms to the lungs to increase the breathing rate, and signals to speed up the heart rate. These electric signals between the brain and the heart increase in intensity in their joint effort to re-establish a healthful baseline. If the response is not enough to restore homeostasis, the brain escalates and undergoes a final surge of electrical signals and a release of neurotransmitters that leads to ventricular fibrillation, an erratic pulsing of the heart that invariably leads to death if not immediately treated. So, the brainwave spikes within a few seconds of asphyxia and death might be that the near-death cortical activation represents a homeostatic mechanism of the brain that serves to revive vital functions in the dying body. Under normal circumstances, the neurons in the heart do not store episodic memories of events. But when the body is going through a life-threatening crisis, the brain sends a red alert with intensified electric signals and access neurotransmitters to the heart. Human memory works in a non-linear way. Sights, sounds, emotions, and so forth are processed and stored in different places in the brain. To recall a specific memory, all of these pieces of information would be brought together. Scientists have long wondered how this happens, and recently a new possibility has emerged: brainwaves. When the neurons fire and send information to nearby neurons in the brain, they give off electrical signals. When populations of neurons fire electrical impulses, their combined discharges create an electrical field in the tissues surrounding them. And because neuronal firing is rhythmic, the surrounding fields of electricity oscillates at different frequencies. These electric fields permeate through brain tissue as brainwaves, which even penetrate the skull, enabling scientists and doctors to detect them with electrodes placed on the scalp. Recent studies have pointed to the direction that these electric fields of the brain are not mere byproducts of the neuron firing, but have a crucial role in brain functioning. A 2022 paper suggests that inside our brain, the most consistent and reliable representation of information is not the electrical activity of the individual neurons, but an overall electric field they collectively produce. This mechanism ensures that the brain can still function even if some neurons die. At the last moment of life, the brain initiates acute electric signals as its final effort to restart the heart. These signals would create a much stronger electric field in the brain that might even spread to the heart. If this happens, then it's possible that the cells and neurons in the heart can receive some information or imprinting from the brain while being influenced by these terminal electric fields that normally wouldn't occur. If the heart is getting transplanted to another body, then this heart might carry traces or impressions of data from its original owner, and therefore pass these memories onto the organ recipient. Such a lingering information emerges in a new physical system and become a part of the memory implanted in the recipient's brain. Do you think this could be the reason why heart transplant can induce memory transfer? If the heart doesn't get transplanted and dies with the rest of the body, then the last bits of information or memory marked in the heart would disappear as the energy that keeps one alive is gone. For many, the important question is there a spiritual soul that exists beyond the human body that leaves this earthly plane when the body dies? If yes, then why does a deceased organ donor's soul or memories remain partially intact with the organ receiver? I think the residual information released from the transplanted organs might not represent a soul merging into another body, but something else. Such memories do not portray the entire personality of the donor and are more like a splinter of the deceased's life. So, I propose that the memory transfer of a heart transplant might relate to a dying brain spreading its informational electric field to the heart in order to restart the heart, and during this desperate attempt, it leaves memory imprints in the heart neurons. On that account, this phenomenon neither negates dualism nor monism theories. What do you think? If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel and share with others. You can also support me on Patreon, which is a monthly charge, or on Buy Me a Coffee. I appreciate your support. This is Curious Being. I'm Tina. Thanks for watching and see you next time.